Everybody's having a good day so far, and we'll do our best not to change that. We're taking a break from our study of Ezra, and I can see the disappointment in your faces. But we'll be back. We'll be back. We're going to take this morning and probably next week some too to talk about the recent trip over to Jordan, Israel, and Greece. About a 19-day trip. There are about 96 slides. So it ain't going to happen all this morning. But it's nice to know up front that you're going to fail, okay? Sets the expectations much lower. Wanted to start with saying again, thank you. Thank you to the elders for allowing me to do this. Thanks for the church for sending us. It was fantastic. It really, really was. And there's several things we're going to see, a lot of things that I'm really not including in here, but just kind of the big sites. And for about 19 days or so, taking off for the travel back and forth, it was, like the old expression, like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, there's just information coming at you and at you and at you. And so we're going to take a look and just kind of walk through where we went, some of the things that really, really impacted me. Dallas, you're free to jump in if there's something that you'd like to do. Ray was going to talk about this. He had to take Deb to the hospital this morning. They think maybe it's another bout of diverticulitis, but anyway, he won't be here for that. All right, so we start. We start in Jordan. And after a couple of days of travel and getting settled into the hotel, our first day actually on the ground was going to Bethany beyond the Jordan. So if you look at John chapter 1, I think it's verse 28, this is where John the Baptist was baptizing. This is the traditional baptism site for Jesus. What I didn't know, and I apologize for this next picture, it didn't zoom in as much as I want to, that there's another thing there. And I guess that I had never put together, is that this is also believed to be the site where Elijah was taken up. And so there's a mosaic there of this scene of Elijah being caught up to heaven. This would have been where Elijah and Elisha touch his cloak to the Jordan River and part it and go across. Okay? But the baptism site, I wanted to point this out. The guy in the blue shirt, maybe a little bit difficult to see, but the guy in the blue shirt making his way back out of there was baptized there that day. Joe Bright was the preacher at Sunset in Springfield and now serves as an elder at Brookline, and he'd been studying with Rob for a while, and Rob was baptized in Christ that day, and it was a really, really neat experience to see. That little wooden fence, and I think we got a better picture of it here as you look down that direction, that little wooden fence is as far as you can go out there. This serves, the Jordan River is the border between Jordan and Israel. You can't swim it, you can't cross it. That's as far as you go. It's a little difficult. There's just to imagine, I looked for a better picture of it that I couldn't find. It looks pretty small, looks pretty muddy. It is. Joe, who talked about baptizing Rob, said he's up to about his knees in mud at the bottom of this. And it looks pretty small. It's not far from this place where Israel crosses into Canaan. But it's also at flood stage. You can just see the edge of the roof there. And behind that roof, there's like bleachered seating up there. And at flood stage, it will be above that. It will fill that. So it's really quite impressive. From there, we went to several places on our way up, but these are kind of the big ones that I wanted to hit. This is a view from Mount Nebo. Mount Nebo, where Moses looks into the Promised Land. There's a church built there on top of that. You can walk around and look, but this is one of the views from the top of that mountain, and there is another. And it's really quite impressive when you stop and think about that somewhere in these valleys, somewhere in this valley, Moses is buried. And we don't know where. Right? Deuteronomy tells us, God let him go up to Mount Nebo, shows him the Promised Land, lets him look, and then Moses dies, and he is buried. He's buried there, and only God knows where it is. All right. So here we are again. These are all views from Mount Nebo. A lot of Bedouins, a lot of shepherds. As we drove around through, you would see this. You'd see it on the side of the road. This sheep, you can see the shepherd way out in the middle. There's sheep, there's goats. Somebody asked our tour guide about these people, kind of hinted at, how do they survive this, or why are they poor, that kind of thing. He said, no, they're not. They own some land. They're quite comfortable. This is just their lifestyle, and this is the lifestyle that they've had for generations, and they continue on. From here, we made our way to Petra. Petra may ring a bell, and I know that the picture I'll show you in just a minute probably will. This is as close as I could get this to zoom in and still be able to make any sense of it at all. And so, welcome to Uncle Jeff's vacation slides here in just a second. At the top of that mountain in the middle, you just barely can make anything out. There's a little white spot there. And that little white spot is the monument or the burial place of Moses' brother Aaron, who dies and is buried on Mount Hor, which is really, really close. This is the land of Seir, the land of Edom. This is right in there. So this is on our way into Petra. Petra is quite an interesting place, all carved out of this rock, numerous caves, and there are house caves, and there are tomb caves. And the way that you know the difference is that tomb caves will be decorated, and house caves will not. Their thought was that this would be the place where you would spend your life. So they built these houses into the rock, and that's where the dead would go. This is a tomb. It's a tomb of apparently a rich person, because it's 2 floors. And so the bottom floor would be for the service, the funeral service, and for the family to gather, and the upstairs is where the body went. The number of pillars on there, if I remember correctly, has to do with the number of people who are buried in there. And there's all kinds of decorations, there's all kinds of things that have meaning. I've got right here in the middle of those 2 columns, there's a little niche carved, and that is an image of the goddess Isis. So Egypt had a big influence here. Okay? This picture you'll probably recognize. The treasury at Petra. One of the most photographed places in the world, I believe, and it's certainly the most photographed place in Jordan. The treasury, there was rumor that there was Egyptian gold here. There's a little urn on the top of that center column, and there are bullet holes there where people have tried to shoot that to see if there's treasure in it. There's not. And what our guide told us was that this was not a treasury as a place that kept money. This is another tomb. There are steps on each side that symbolize their journey to the next world. All of these kinds of things are in this. All right. The theater. I did want to get a shot of the theater at Petra. Its claim to fame is that this is the only theater that is not built but carved. This was all carved out of the rock. People still live around here. This is down towards the town center. There are caves and tombs all around that. Stacy and one of the other ladies from our group was talking to a lady there, and they asked her about where she lived, and she said, "Yeah, it's just in a cave, just not very far from here." And really, and they said, "Well, does it? Because it's incredibly hot." Okay, he said, "Does it cool off in there at night?" And she goes, "No. We have us, and we have the animals, and we have everything, and no, it does not. But that's just the way of life." Okay. This is a view from the top. We drove out of there, drove back up, and this is a view of the top of Petra down in those canyons into where it's carved out. All right.
Hey, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
I think one of the interesting things about Petra was we stayed in a hotel at the entrance
Right.
of Petra, and then we took about an hour to walk down. There's so many things to see.
Yeah.
And huge
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that it's a very pleasant walk down,
Yes.
but you gotta walk up.
Yeah, but you have to come back out.
Yeah, that was the kicker.
Right.
In 100 degree weather.
Yes. Yeah. They do offer rides down in a couple of ways. One's golf carts, and it's I think about $40 a head if you want to ride down and back, which sounds really high. Coming back, it really doesn't sound that bad. You know, it's not as bad. And there are guys along as you make your way into entrance with horses, and you can ride a horse down. Back. We had several of our group rode down and back. We had several that walked down, rode back. I wasn't smart enough to do that. We walked the whole thing. But anyway, it was very, very interesting. From Petra, we went, and this is where we stayed. This is called the King's Camp. These are look like Bedouin tents that we stayed in. We were incredibly nervous about this, or I say we. Stacy was far more nervous about this than I was, but she was very nervous when we said, we're going to spend the night in the tent in the desert. Yes. It was much, much nicer than we thought. The setup, there's a bunch of these. Anyway, this is a place called Wadi Rum, and it's in the desert where Moses and the Israelites would have wandered. Okay, and there's several of these campsite kind of things around. But here's a look at the inside. It wasn't nearly as bad as you thought it was. It was a nice bed. It had air conditioning, had a bathroom in it. I mean, it was just, I don't know what people were complaining about. It wasn't all that bad at all. We went from there. The next day, we went on what they call a Jeep tour in Wadi Rum. I got all kinds of pictures of this, and I only have a couple that are up here. Star Wars fans, it'll look familiar. Star Wars Episode 1 was filmed here. Aladdin, the live-action Aladdin from Disney, that was filmed here also. These are carvings on the side of a hill there, and some of these are very, very ancient. Some of them aren't, and some of them are very ancient. And they tell the story of the hunters and the animals that were there at the time. It's really, really fascinating. We had about 3 stops in this morning tour. So we'd drive and then we'd stop and get out, and the Bedouins were there, and they had things to sell, and they had things to show you and that kind of stuff. And there was one spot where if you wanted to, you could take a camel ride to the next one. I didn't. But several of our group did. About a 20-minute camel ride. And so to walk out there and see them, it's really kind of interesting. And we pulled in that night at the camp, and you would look, and there would just be camels, people leading camels, or you'd have all the folks out there. After we left Wadi Rum, we went to Israel. We were about 3 days in Jordan. We got to the border, and apparently, just so you know, if you ever go, there's a required amount of time to spend in Jordan. I didn't know this. We all got to Jordan at the same time, and so they stamped our passports, and we all went through. When we got ready to go through the border into Israel, about half the group got held up because our passports were stamped a day later than the others, because we got there at about midnight, and we didn't spend enough time in Jordan, so it's a $15 tax to get out of the country. Okay? Just in case you know. Just in case you go, all right, need to make sure we spend plenty of time here. Our guide in Jordan, name was James. Fantastic. It really was. Knew his stuff, took us in all kinds of places. Again, other places that we're not really even looking at yet, or we haven't even seen. But several places, very good. But once you get to the border, he can't go. So we have a new group, or a new bus, new guide, new driver, everything. So we make our way through, and the first place that we go is the Dead Sea. It's really kind of, I guess it's somewhat sad as we drive along the highway and to hear your guide say where we're driving now used to be underwater, that the Dead Sea is drying up. A lot of evaporation. If you kind of look, past the people floating there, it's really not that far to the other side, but you can barely see it. just because of the evaporation that's going on there, and they're mining the salt out of the Dead Sea. So it continues to shrink. But the experience was you need to go float in the Dead Sea. Okay? And so our guide told us, here's what you do. You walk out there till you get about waist deep, and then just sit down. And that's it. That's all you need to do. And he's 100% right. The only problem was, what we didn't figure on was, how do you get back up? Right? Because it's much harder to get set back up because you cannot sink. There's that much mineral content in there. Our Jordan guide said that the mud you feel at the bottom that's decaying animals that have died in there. And then you have all the salt and the mineral content. It's supposed to be very, very good for you. It smells awful, but it's supposed to be really, really good for you. But if you do go, make sure that you wear shoes. This is what's on the bottom. Those are salt, just chunks of salt all over. It was a really, really neat experience. We were told, we had some friends that had gone before, said that if you do this and you go get in the Dead Sea, here's what you do. You go find you some really cheap boat shoes, and you take some old clothes, and when you're done, you throw them away, because you can't get that out of there. Now, Dallas, you kept yours.
Till we got back here.
Okay, there you go. I think Dallas said they laid theirs out to dry, and you couldn't hardly bend them the next day. Right? That's what it does to you. The Dead Sea, it was very, very fascinating. It was a very, very good experience and a neat thing to see. The next day, we went to a place called Masada. Now, this is a model of what Masada would have looked like. It's a mountain fortress. It was one of Herod's mountain fortresses. Now, its story is rather grim. That during the Jewish revolt of 66 to 70, when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, many Jews left, or several Jews left, and they went here. They went to Masada, this fortress. It's really, really very, very well done. It's almost like a little city. There are storehouses, there's bathhouses, there's a synagogue, there's all kinds of things here. And a community can survive. It's got cisterns. It's got a really, really neat place, and it's very, very easy to defend because of where it's located. It's on a mountain just right off the Dead Sea. However, the Romans found where they went, and they came. I want to show you what the ruins. There's that, and you can see the terraces that are still there now. And they came, and so the Romans built a siege ramp out of dirt. They just began to fill this in and build a way to get to these Jewish people at the top. This is a picture of the ramp that they built. And so as the Jews watch this happen, and they understand that what's getting ready to happen, is they've got several people there, but they're not enough to fend off the Romans. And what it's going to look like for them, the abuse that they're going to suffer, and they'd be slaves to Rome, and maybe even the deaths that they're going to have to die, and all the things they're going to have to witness, they make a decision, and they all gather, and there's a place in there, I believe it's called the Lot Room, is what it's called now, where they chose 10 men, 10 and then 1. 10 men whose names came up, and their job was to kill everyone, and 1 who was to kill the other 9 and then himself. The Romans made their way in the next day, and what they found were all the people dead. They would rather die than to be servant to Rome. So it's a tough spot. But I do want to show you this, because there are several places that we saw, and Mount Nebo, the baptism site, all of those things that are incredibly special. To think, of who's been here and what's going on. We went to a place called En Gedi, and En Gedi is found in 1 Samuel. It's when David is running from Saul. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. There's 2 places where David does this, and this is the first one, where David and his men are hiding in a cave. Okay? There's a park there, national park, that you can tour. We couldn't that day because they closed it about the time we got there because somebody got hurt. We don't know exactly what the problem was, but they closed the park. We weren't letting anybody in. So we drove up just on the other side of the valley to this. It's called the Field School, and we were able to look across. And what we got to see was there's this. You see that green that makes its way up through there. That's the water line. That's how they find the springs and where all these things are in the desert. And right back about the middle of that, you see a really dark spot, and we've zoomed that in a little bit. And this is the cave. This is the cave where David hid from Saul, and this is where the cave where David cut off part of Saul's robe. And after he left, went out and said, "This is how close I was to killing you." And again, the baptism site was again first experience of going, wow, this is so neat to be in places like this. Mount Nebo, again, but another spot of standing here of going, David, Saul, the armies, they were here. I mean, this is a real thing. You see the waterfall, you barely can, but there's a waterfall there. And after spending that kind of time in the desert, you know that's where they're at, where they're going. They're going where there is water. And this is where they stay. And it was just really, really amazing. From there, we went to Qumran. Qumran was the community, the home of another group of Jews that we don't read about in Scripture, but they're there nonetheless, the Essenes. The Essenes are a very, I guess we want to use terms closer to ours, a very conservative group. How about that? Very, very focused on being the people of God. They moved to this place called Qumran, because they believed that the priesthood and all of the temple worship and the things that were going on in Jerusalem had become so corrupt that they couldn't be part of it anymore. So they withdraw, and they're out here in the desert. There is at least some thought among scholars that one of these that was in this group was John the Baptist, that he was a part of this group. What's really significant about this, it's hard to see from that picture, but the next one will be better, are the caves. It was in the 40s. 47, is that right? When a Bedouin shepherd boy is throwing rocks in these caves and he hears something break. He goes in to investigate, and he finds these clay cylinders. And inside them are all these scrolls. And at first, because this is animal skin that they're working with, he takes these to a tanner, thinking, okay, I've found some animal skins, maybe I can do something with them, maybe I can sell them. And as they look, they realize that what he has are the scrolls of Scripture. Of all of the books of the Old Testament, there is at one point everything but Esther, but now they believe a fragment of Esther has been found, and several commentaries that this group had written about the Scriptures. It's really, really neat. This particular cave here, they found the scroll of Isaiah. Now, the scroll of Isaiah is on display at the Israeli Museum. We couldn't take pictures of it, but we got to go in and look at it. And there's a big, giant, round display in there, and this scroll is laid out on it, and you can walk around and look at it. What they really found that was incredibly interesting is these are far older than many of the texts that we already had of the Hebrew Bible, and that they matched with little exception. Very, very few things that are different at all, textual variants. And it's just one of those things that gives you confidence that what we have is the real thing, is what they studied, years and years ago. The Dead Sea Scrolls have been an incredibly important find for biblical study. Various caves. Actually, one of the guys that was the brother of the guy that led our group, their parents were missionaries over here for a long time when they were kids, and he's actually been in that cave. Wasn't supposed to, but he did. He climbed down and snuck in it. So anyway, all right. Made it to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was kind of a milestone in a lot of ways. One was we all wanted to get there, and the other one was it was the first time that we were able to stay in the same hotel for several days. Other than that, we were packing up and moving every single day. 40 8 of us, I think. There's 48 of us on that bus, and everybody's luggage. You have to get out and get back on. And anyway, but we got to stay in Jerusalem. So we made it, and the first day was going to the temple area and the Western Wall. We were only there in Jerusalem that particular day for about a half a day. It was because it was Flag Day, which here we go, that's great. There, not so much. It's Israeli Flag Day. And you have Israelis who live there among Palestinians who don't want them there. And so it would be, I guess, like having a 4th of July parade through London. I don't know, maybe something similar to that. But of all of these people were going to be out with their flags, waving the Israeli flag, and it started at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There were streets closed. There was all kinds of things around there because of this. So we went in the morning to Jerusalem, and then we left. Our guide wanted us out of there. So we went to the Western Wall. There's some excavations going on under it. We were able to go look at those. Some really neat things that we got to see. But this is what it looked like. There's 2 sides of this. There's a dividing line about where those umbrellas are. There's a dividing line, and that's the women are on the other side, and the men are on this side. We're able to go down, and as you walk in, there's the thing, right? You get your yarmulke and go. You don't go without it. And we have, but this is what it looks like, praying and chanting and weeping and wailing at this wall. I do have pictures of it. I didn't put them up here, but of prayers written and stuffed in the wall. Right? This is where we gather. This is the Western Wall around the temple, the only thing that remains, and they continue to pray there. We did get a bit of a treat we weren't expecting, because our guide wasn't expecting to do this for us, is that we were going to go down to the Western Wall and then we were going to leave. But he said, I've got something else. We're going to go up to the Temple Mount. Now, there have been people who've asked, were you nervous, about security and those things that are going on while you're over. This is probably the only time I was even a little nervous. Most of the time it really wasn't anything. We didn't even know if anything else was going on. But you have to go through security to get down to the Western Wall to start with. So you empty all your pockets, you go through the metal detectors, and they let you go. Then when we came back out that security, and then we turned around, went through another set of security to go to the Temple Mount, and we did it again. There's a covered walkway that makes its way from the main street that this comes in on up to the Temple Mount. I didn't get pictures of this because I don't think we were supposed to. But as you made your way around that corner and started to get to the opening to go through to the Western Wall, there are Israeli police lining all sides, heavily armed, tear gas canisters, machine guns, and they're all ready. Our guide said, we're getting ready to go through here. Everybody stay together. Do not get separated here. And as luck would have it, the only person that got separated was our leader from the group. But the rest of us waited, right? We waited patiently, and he went back and found him and brought him through. He began to tell us a little bit more about this, and really tensions are really high because it is Flag Day, and it is a spot that is very tense anyway. The Temple Mount is controlled by the Muslims, right? And the rest of this around it is controlled by the Jews. And so we have a picture of the Dome on the Rock where the temple used to sit. As we waited, and as he kind of looked around and was showing us a few things, we saw a group of Jewish young men coming through, and at the front of them and behind them were Israeli police. Okay, and not necessarily to protect them, but to keep them from doing something stupid, is what he said. He goes, because the Israeli police know that if they do something stupid here, missiles start coming over the walls. And so they walk them through, and they make sure they get back out. We got a nice picture of the Dome on the Rock. Yes, this is a Muslim. Right behind that, right behind us is a mosque, and they were coming in and out of there. We had zero trouble at all. But this is another spot where it kind of hits you about where you are. And time permitting, we're going to get to another one this morning. This is the eastern gate of the city. It's walled up on the other side. And you'll see from another picture, it's been closed off. But this is the gate. This is the gate that Jesus rides in on the donkey at the triumphant entry. And I'm going, and here it is. Right, this is the original one. We went from there, we went to Bethlehem, and a nice picture of us trying to get into the Church of the Nativity. It's a very small door. I guess they intend to weed people out, but it doesn't work because you can look inside. And there's what it looks like inside. It is an Orthodox church. There's a lot of decorative things there. There's all these columns. There's mosaics on the walls. It's incredibly beautiful. Another thing that I've mentioned to several people who've asked about the trip, this is one of the things that caught me off guard. Not the ornate buildings or anything like that, the number of people. I've never seen that many tour buses in my life in one spot. There would be parking lots full. And our group, we had headsets so that our guide could talk to us because you can't hear any other way. There would be groups coming through, and they have a big sign, and that's their group, and you'd see them all wandering this way and all wandering this way. And it was really, really difficult to navigate in some places. Maybe we'll get to another one of those in just a second. It is a beautiful building, and we didn't get to go down there. But this is the entrance to the cave where they believe Jesus is born in Bethlehem. So we got to see that. This bronze wall hanging was donated to the church there by Pope John Paul II. Bethlehem has a lot of history there. There's the shepherd's field, which we just kind of get to look at on the way by, but the shepherd field, like where Ruth and Boaz would have met. And this is a bronze picture of the call of David. And so you have Samuel, and you have all of Jesse's other sons, and you have David with the sheep that's getting ready to come in. And it's just really, really interesting to take a look at. The next day, and we may spend some time here, we left Bethlehem, we got back to the hotel. The next day, we went back over to the Mount of Olives, but we stopped here, and this is a view from the Garden of Gethsemane. And the wall that you see just to the right and at the top, that's the eastern gate that's now walled up. It's fascinating, it's frustrating in a way, but it's understandable. There's a church built on everything. Okay? There is. And it was good reason. You're in a place, Jewish and Muslim, that the events that are significant for Christianity don't really mean a lot to them. And so, as Constantine is appointed, comes to power as Emperor of Rome, his mother, who is a Christian, makes a trip here to the Holy Lands, talks to people, finds out where these places are, and many churches are built on top of these sites to preserve them. So this is a view from the Garden of Gethsemane, and right next to the gardens on the left is called the Church of All Nations. They were having a service in there. It's a little bit hard to get in to see some things, but in the center of this church, in the center of this church, up by where the altar is, there's a rock. And the church was built around it. And this is the rock that that's believed where Jesus prayed in the garden. And we preserve that. This picture of an olive tree, that olive tree dates back 2,000 years, quite possibly standing at the time that Jesus came. This is the mosaic that's in the church, stands above the altar of Jesus praying on that rock, and again, the rock is right below it. That's where it stays. But the garden is a really there's several spots along this trip that kind of get you. The baptism site we've already mentioned, Mount Nebo, the cave where David hid, those kind of things, the birthplace. Seeing the temple wall, seeing the eastern gate, but here. It's really, really beautiful. It's an olive orchard. Very, very well preserved. Tours can go, you can go in there. There's the garden that sits next to the Church of All Nations, and then I think it's right across the street's a private one. That's what they call the private garden. And it's very, very similar. And you can go in there, and then so our group went in, and just our group for about 30 minutes. And just to be able to spread out and just to look at all of these trees, think about what happens here, the importance of it all. And I couldn't resist. This is a shot of the eastern gate from the garden. And I think maybe one of the things that hit me was just trying to imagine it all. But imagine it being night. Imagine knowing what it is that's coming. Because he does. I mean, Jesus prays 3 times for this to stop, but to look across the Kidron Valley and see them coming. And watch the torches as they make their way down across that valley out of view and then come back up, knowing exactly what it is that you're getting ready to face. It's just incredibly amazing. This is a view. We went on up to the Mount of Olives, a view of the city. There's the dome on the rock in the middle. But right here, very, very close to this, there's a chapel there where Jesus prays and weeps over Jerusalem. But you can see it. In between here and there is a graveyard. And you see all those. But there's one that I wanted to point out, and it's that little hut-looking thing in the middle. And if I understood our guide right, and I sure hope I did, because not, I'm wrong, and I hate being wrong. But that is the monument to the tomb of Absalom, David's son, right outside the city. This picture is taken back in the city, but it's looking back out, and it's taken from the top of what they believe to be the original walls of the Jebusite city that David conquered before it became Jerusalem. It's on the way down to Hezekiah's tunnel. It's another one of those spots where you stop and you look and you go, we have David and his armies coming. We have the king of the Jebusites saying you can't enter here. We're so well fortified that the blind and the lame could stop you. And that David takes the city. Hezekiah's tunnel. This is on the way down to Hezekiah's tunnel. I have 0 pictures of Hezekiah's tunnel. I was at the tail end of our group, and when I went to take a picture, my flashlight on my phone would go off, and you don't want to be without one because there is no seeing in there. The tunnel itself is very narrow. It's wet. Water still runs there. You step off when you first get in, and it's about thigh high. It goes down quite a bit between knee and ankle, pretty well all the way through. It is incredibly tight. I've got scratches on my watch from walking through. You rub your head in places. If you're claustrophobic, do not go. Okay? And I say because it might not be bad if you're claustrophobic and you just went and you were able to walk through the tunnel, but you can't. And the reason is because, again, the number of people. There's just a line of people making their way through.
Even I had to spot that.
Right. Dallas had to get, there you go. But and of course, anytime somebody stops to take a picture, everybody stops. I was at the tail end of our group. There's a group behind us of, I'd say college-age kids. Some of them were incredibly nervous, I think, about being in there because it would stop. And it may not stop for like 10 seconds, but it seemed like an hour and a half. I mean, when you're in there, and you're just going, I hope this thing holds. And they'd just be yelling, move, move. It's like, hey, nobody's going anywhere, right? Just calm down. And they finally got through that. Anyway, the tunnel Hezekiah digs as the Assyrians are starting to threaten the city. Digs it from the spring brings it back in so they have water in Jerusalem. It's really amazing because they start on either end and meet in the middle. It's just it really, really impressive. From there we went to the Garden Tomb. Now it takes some imagination, but I did like this place. The Garden Tomb is a spot where you can go, and it's quite open. We had a place where our guide that was in there talked to us about this. This is at least a proposed site for the crucifixion. Now, you have to use some imagination to get a skull out of this rock, but there are some that there was a British officer when Britain occupied that was camped around there, looked and went, hey, this looks like a skull. Maybe this is the place of the crucifixion. It does make a little sense. Archaeologically, it does not, but it is close to one of the main roads, which we know that's where crucifixions happened. And we do have this rock. It's interesting. It's just, and they did a good job of selling it, but it was a very, very nice area, and it was a nice spot where there is a tomb there. We got to go in. But they just allow you like 30 seconds in there. You go in and out and get out of there. We had a little devotional. Actually had communion just not very far from this, but it was really very, very moving. I say this is very nice, and this is a probable site, or a possible site for the crucifixion, although much less likely. All right. From there, we went to, our guide took us, this was another bonus thing, and this is just out in what they called the Judean wilderness. So where Jesus would have gone temptation, he's out in the Judean wilderness. You can see, just barely, kind of at least the start of a building down at the bottom of that picture, and I've got a little bit better picture of it there. It's just really dark. It's a monastery. And it's still a working monastery. But this place is also known by the people there as the Valley of the Shadow of Death. It's the place where the sun does not hit, just because of the depth of it and the way those canyons work. So, you think of David talking about walking through the Valley of the Shadow of Death. He's referring to a real place. We got to look out at the Jericho Road. As Jesus talks about, a man goes down from Jerusalem to Jericho. The parable of the Good Samaritan. There's actually on the road, there's a place called the Good Samaritan Inn. Right? Now, obviously somebody was thinking, right? They're marketing. But this was very impressive. I had somewhere I couldn't find a picture of an old bridge that's actually still there from this. All right, we are going to get to this, but we're not going to get much further. I couldn't blow this sign up again to where you could read it, but that sign, that is the sign for King David's tomb. It's beyond that arch. We didn't get to go in there and look at that. We were making our way to one of possible sites for the upper room. It's been redone. I don't have a picture of it. It's been redone. A lot of the arches done during the Crusaders period. But there's a couple of places that they believe that the upper room where Jesus and his disciples met on that night are here, and this is one of them. But when I said that the Garden Tomb was a nice place because you could kind of sit and you could reflect, and it was outdoors, it was open, it was really, really nice. The most probable site for the crucifixion is here, and this is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Right? And so this is it as you begin to make your way in. There's a nice mosaic there on the wall. Shows Jesus after they've taken him down from the cross and they're preparing his body. Okay? This is what it looks like inside. This is the number of people that we're talking about. And you could hardly hear anything. Even the guide that's talking in your ear in the headset, it's really hard to hear. There's that many people. But what was really interesting as we made our way out is you see that little thing. It's got all the ornaments hanging on it there and all the sensors on it. Is right below it. Oh, I'm sorry. This is where they believe it was where the cross would have stood. It's just on the other side of that wall. But this rock is the one they believe where his body was prepared. And so that's all those people gather around this rock. And then you see people rubbing it, and you see people kissing it, and all kinds of things. We're gonna stop there because the bell's gonna ring. Let me see where I'm going next. Okay, yeah, we'll still be in Jerusalem next time. Anyway, it was really hard for this one to make much of an emotional impact just because of the number of folks that are there. But what I wanted to get at before we stop is that this is it's just one of those times where you walk through, like from where we've started, from the baptism site to Mount Nebo, to the Dead Sea, to the desert where they wandered, to all of these places where you just where it just kind of hits you of going, this is real stuff. These things are real. I mean, these are the places. Yeah, there may be some of going, well, I don't know if this is exactly the place or not, like the Garden Tomb versus the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I'm in the area. How's that? As we get together next time, we'll finish Jerusalem, get to Galilee, and hopefully get all the way to Greece. But I want to say thank you again for coming to Uncle Jeff's vacation slides. I just feel like I ought to have a projector, you know. Here's where we were. Here's some people you don't know, that kind of stuff. But again, I want to say thanks. Thanks to you. Thanks to the elders. This is an unbelievable experience. And we'll continue on with this next week. We'll get it finished. Let's have a prayer as we close. Father, we're thankful for today and all the blessings that it brings. We're thankful for this time that we have together as your people. We're thankful for all that you've done. And as we're reminded, these aren't just stories. These are the events that led to salvation, to our salvation, our being able to be included in your family. We're so thankful that you have left us evidence for us to see, to make it more real to us. But we're very, very thankful, Father, for the sacrifice that you made and the love that you have for us. Our prayer is constantly that we respond to that love well, and that we live out of that love in response to who you are and who you would have us to be. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.